Hello and welcome everyone, this is Calebovitsch coming to you with another deck check. This time I will be talking about another Xenan deck. This time it is called Xenan Chains. Chains? Do you mean Martyr's Chains? Well, yes, I do mean Martyr's Chains. And Martyr's Chains is just a big ol' mean green fighting machine, or defensive machine if you want. That is a very expensive relic with a very expensive influence threshold of 4 justice. And we do not have any justice, sigils or other powers in this deck. So it already starts looking quite intriguing, right? Well, yes it is. So this is a deck that has a, as usual as I try to make decks, a two-pronged assault. It has a plan A and a plan B. And plan A is a strict mid-range deck, mid-range Xenan deck with a lot of very stat-efficient units that time has. And plan B is just cheating that Martyr's Chains into play via something you're gonna see in a moment. Alright, as far as Xenan decks go, especially Xenan mid-range decks, there is a ton of them out there. Mainly because there is a lot of good Xenan cards, i.e. Time and Shadow cards, in the current card pool. And that leads people just to brew with what they have. And the results are numerous. There is, well, I made a mill deck, just a mill deck. This is also just a tier 2 deck, which means it's not the best tournament deck out there. But it has a quite good record as far as I've been playing it, and I've played it 30 or 40 games so far this week. Many of these decks include the same cards such as Annihilate, Banish, and Cold Blood, Xenan Temple, Moonstone Guard, Vanguard, Teacher of Humility, etc. But they differ both in the cards they have and in their strategies. So let's get into that. So as I've said, strategy number 1 from this deck, the main one, is just going aggressive on the opponent, playing units as early as possible, having a lot of removal to follow your threats out with, so that the opponent has nothing on board, and obviously killing them in a matter of turns. Plan B is a bit more sophisticated, and it is centered around a card called Governor Sahin. This is a legendary explorer that was introduced in Set 5 Defiance, and for the first couple of months it was a 3/3 unit. Direwolf buffed it to a 3/4 about 2 weeks ago, and fortunately currently it is out of torch range, which makes him a lot better, honestly a lot better, because as all you guys know, if the opponent is playing fire, do they have torch in their hand on turn 1? Well, yes they do, for sure. So this unit says once per turn you may pay 3 and sacrifice a relic from play to play the top relic of your deck. So you need to have relics in play, and you have to have good relics in your deck. So I only have Martyr's Chains in my deck from relics, so the second part of Governor Sahin's effect, you fetch a relic from your deck, means you will always get one or the other. And there are 2 copies in this deck, because if you draw it, if you have it in your hand, you have no way of playing it, and that's why you need a second copy in there somewhere. Just in the case you draw one and you can't combo it out. But Caleb, you need to have relics in play as well. Yes, dear viewer, and that is why you have some special cards in this deck as well, that are maybe not special for as far as Xenan decks go, like Merchants or Teachers of Humility, but they work with this combo even better. So first up, this is a big piece of news that you might not know, because there still isn't a comprehensive rulebook for this game, Direwolf, please. And you might not know this, but a cursed relic that you play on your opponent is still your relic. It still counts that you have a relic in play. And when you have to sacrifice a relic for effects like Governor Sahin or Lethrai Lobotomy, you still can sacrifice a cursed relic that you have played on your opponent. We don't have any attachments in our deck that are cursed relics, but we do have units that put cursed relics on the opponent. And these are Teacher of Humility, Infiltrate, which means when this creature attacks and deals damage to the enemy player, you play disciplinary weights on the enemy player, then each player draws a card. This is a very great unit when it comes to stats, because it's a 3/3 for 2, which is above the curve. And disciplinary weights themselves are a very oppressive effect. When the cursed player draws an additional card, increase its cost by 2, which means it doesn't work on power cards, and it doesn't work on cards that you draw at the beginning of your turn. I mean the first one. It works on cards you draw from Nightfall, it works on cards you draw from effects like Wisdom of the Elders, it works on all the effects that have draw written in the card. Even when Dark Return says draw a unit from your void, disciplinary weights also make that cost that much higher. And sure, you don't have any more effects like Nightfall. Well, only there's the Mirror's Nightshade I'm going to get to in a moment. But you don't have many effects that make the opponent draw additional cards. So if the opponent is not playing a hardcore, greedy, draw your whole deck, you can sacrifice those disciplinary weights anyway. You also have, and I would like to thank the chat again because they pointed this card out to me yesterday, Mirror's Nightshade. It's a 3/2 unit that has +1/+1 while an enemy is cursed, and has an ultimate ability of pay 5 to play Nyctophobia on the enemy player. Now, Nyctophobia is a cursed relic that when it is summoned into play, it triggers Nightfall, and Night deals +1 damage to the cursed player. And given that only other Mirror's Nightshades trigger Nightfall in your deck, this means that once the opponent is dealt 2 damage, you can get rid of your Nyctophobia. So honestly, this means we have already 8 cards that generate relics for us, but we also have 4 Aurelian Merchants in our deck. These merchants are here for 5 of our market cards, and right now I'm just going to say something about one of them. Azurite Prixus. Now this card reads literally 0 cost, 1 time requirement, no card text whatsoever for us. This card is in the market just for the fact that it is a 0 cost relic that you can play because you have time influence when you get it via the time merchant. And it isn't a relic you have in your deck, which means you can't get it off of Governor Sahin. But you can get it from your market to your hand, you can play it, and then you can sacrifice it to the Governor to get your Martyr's Chains in play. Now, this deck can get Chains into play as soon as turn 4, and you will see a game where I have managed to do just that. And it was amazing, it was like a goldfish game. Alright, so let me now talk you through all the cards and all the card choices. So we're starting out our curve out with Initiate of the Sands, aka the Eternal Llanowar Elves. So this is a basic time unit. For 1 power it's a 1/1 that says when it is in play you have +1 maximum power, which ramps you up to your future threats. Next up we have Mirror's Nightshade that has a very good stat line. Before this I was playing Black Hole War Leader, that's a 2/3 Minotaur that inspires your units to be bigger. Each time it hits the opponent, the Inspire is bigger and it gets bigger. But this one has like a similar stat line, it's a 3/2 instead of a 2/3. And, but it has the ability of giving the opponent a cursed relic. Teacher of Humility is the best aggressive time 2-drop, and it also combos with Governor, so it's a shoo-in right here. Next up we have Amaran Stinger that was also buffed in one of the previous balance patches. So it's a 2/4 Charger for 3 and a single time requirement that says Infiltrate when it deals damage to the opponent. Put 5 Scorpion Traps in the top 20 cards of the enemy deck. And this means the Scorpion Traps read that when the opponent draws them, you get a Scorpion and they get to redraw a card. So this means you're gonna get some Scorpions in the following turns, which helps against aggro, obviously helps against control. This it was buffed from putting 3 Scorpion Traps into play, and this small change made a huge difference in the resurgence of this card. Aurelian Merchant is here and is gonna stay, because you gotta have merchants and or smugglers in your deck. I am playing Aurelian Merchants instead of Ibn Smugglers, because I don't like the stat line and the effect of and the ability of Ibn Smugglers. And this is a more defensive unit, that's great, ramps you up a bit more, that's great, and allows you to play some cards both main deck and in your market. In this case, this is just Xenan Temple that you don't need 100% to be in your market, but it's still good to have there. I'm going to talk about the market cards in a moment. Governor Sahin, I've already talked about him when it comes to strategy, so if this was not a combo deck, this would be like Vara Vengeance Seeker. The kind of similar stat line, dies to the same removal, but this one has a potential higher upside for the remainder of your game. And we're rounding out our units with the heavy hitters. Darude Sandstorm Titan for 4 cost with a double time requirement. It's a 5/6 endurance unit that says that units can't fly. So sorry green flyers, you still can't fly. This is a clearly overstated unit that Direwolf said time and time again, no, we're not making the same mistake ever again. Then they released Siegebreaker. That's a 4-cost 6/5, maybe not endurance, but has overwhelm. So lessons not learned? We'll see. Anyway, just a great unit overall. And the highest costed unit in this deck is a 5-cost with double time requirement 5/5 Moonstone Vanguard that has endurance and pledge. And to be honest guys, this pledge on this unit, pledge reads on your first turn, a card with pledge can be played as a sigil. This pledge has come for me into effect more than once and is just great. When this unit attacks, you get to draw a card. So it generates card advantage similar to like a Mystic Ascendant or something like that, but it's 1 cheaper. And when it blocks, you gain 5 health. That is also great. It has endurance, so it can both attack and defend on your next turn. So that's a great upside. Is immune to Defiance, is immune to Permafrost and other stun effects. What else can I say? It's just an all-around overpowered and very pushed unit. Next up, we have attachments, and we only have 2 attachments here, and these are both Martyr's Chains. Now, this card says that at the end of your turn, double the attack and health of your units, which means your units grow and grow and grow and grow out of control. So even just having a single unit, I'm not talking about Aurelian Merchant, because it's just going to be a big blocker, but every other unit turns to a deadly threat in a matter of turns. But this card also has Empower, kill an enemy unit. Empower means when you put a power card into play. So each time you play a power card, you kill a unit. And you kill a unit. And this is the plan B. This is the final push that this deck sometimes needs for when the opponent stabilizes. Or if you manage to goldfish it out on turn 4 or 5, means the opponent possibly cannot catch up, because usually the answers for this card are in the market of decks. And the fastest one is obviously just getting the Rocano Smuggler to get you a boar. But other than that, well, they're not getting anything else, so sure. Also one other thing. Another thing you could be playing here as a finisher is a card called Pit of Lenecta. So this is a 9 cost with a triple time requirement relic that says when an enemy unit goes into a void, you gain 2 health. Okay, but Empower, play 2 7/7 Sandworms exhausted. So each time you play a power, you play 2 huge worms. And then again, and then again. So even if you don't draw a unit, you just draw power, you get 2 good units for free. The upside of this card is that you can play it out when you get up to 9 power. While when you have Martyr's Chains and you get it in your hand, the only thing you can do is market it out for something else. This you can play out, but it doesn't have the ability of killing the opponent's units, and works a bit slower in my opinion. So that's why I'm opting for 2 chains. Also, there could be a case, for example, for getting 1 Martyr's Chains and 1 Pitiful Inecta, but then you're not sure which one you're going to get from the governor, and it's good to know your plan through and through and be 100% sure what you're getting, right? For example, if you go shopping, you want to be 100% sure what you're getting, right? I'm not talking about buying booster packs. I'm just talking about shopping in general. Anyway, let's get back to this guide. Next up, we have Xenan Temple, the Xenan site. That's a 5 cost with double time and double shadow requirement, has durability of 3. The constant ability is when an enemy unit dies, steal it and put it into your void. So this alone helps against a lot of things. A lot of things the opponents could be playing. Stops their Dark Return, stops their Haunting Scream, stops their a lot of other stuff. And the agenda here is playing one of 3 cards. First up is Xenan Initiation. Give one of your units +1/+1 and killer. And given that you can have Scorpions, i.e. deadly units in this deck, or just generally big units, this is quite good. This is just like a removal. Also remember that using this killer is attacking, so it triggers all things that trigger on units attacking. For example, Moonstone Vanguard, when attacks, you get to draw a card. And when it has killer and attacks, this ability triggers, you draw a card, good game. Second card is Scare. This is the agenda card that is scarcely used to a good effect. It can sometimes buff your unit from like a 2/4 to a 4/2. It can on occasion kill a random Aurelian Merchant or something like that, but usually just doesn't work. And the third agenda card is Xenan Augury. Draw one of the top 3 cards of your deck, put the rest on bottom, you gain 3 health, so it's just a redraw of a card. And on turn 4 you get to play World Joiner, which is another humongous threat that the opponent has to get rid of. 2 main deck, 1 in the market, sure. Next up, the spells are 3 pieces of Seek Power. And at the beginning I was playing with 4 and I had 1 fewer in Cold Blood, but I was usually flooded, and I'm thinking of decreasing this number further, but so far I'm just playing with 3 and it has been okay, both to get the colors that we need. Fortunately we were only running a 2-color deck. No, don't look at the chains, guys, it's a 2-color deck. It's Xenan Chains, it's not Current Chains, it's Xenan Chains. Alright. Next up, we have our removal, and that's 4 Annihilates. For 2 cost, 1 shadow requirement. You get to kill a unit with a single faction, and that is this has a very high target range from Baby Vara to Moonstone Vanguard to Sandstorm Titan to a ton of other things. Next up, we have 4 pieces of Banish. There's a 3 cost time and shadow requirement fast spell as well. Kill an enemy unit or relic with cost 4 or less. So this works against like multicolored units. For example, what do we have there? Like the 3/2 sharpshooters in Recano. Also kills relics such as Disciplinary Weights if someone happens to get it on you. Avigraft, Combustion Cell, a lot of targets all in all. And you're rounding your removal suite with 3 in Cold Bloods. That's a 4 cost shadow requirement slow spell. Kill an enemy unit. If it was Justice, the enemy player discards each copy from their hand and deck. They can't leave the void. You lose all Justice influence. Oh no, I can't play my chains anyway. And these are all just great for the units that you usually can get rid of with the other pieces of removal. For example, Joe of the Eternal of the Endless Horde, or Zalchi, or stuff like that. Well, Zalchi is the biggest unit problem against this deck, so yeah, anyway. Also, this deck is running 25 power cards, 9 time sigils, 4 shadow sigils. Also running a full 4-off suite of all the double-colored power cards, like 4 Crests of Mystery, 4 Seats of Mystery, and 4 Xenan Banners. Now, let's get to the market, shall we? Okay. Azurite Prixis, as I previously said, you can just silence this relic. It does nothing. It is just to have a 0-cost relic in your market for getting it with the merchant and sacrificing it to Governor Sahin. You might also be running, instead of this, a 1-cost, for example, a 1-cost relic in your market, like Infinite Hourglass, that your units have endurance. But your units already have endurance, like Sandstorm Titans and Moonstone Vanguards, and honestly, you don't want to be getting that from your market. You only want to get Prixis as a combo piece for your Governor Sahin. That's it. You wouldn't be running the Hourglass anyway. Next up, we have Disjunction, a 2-cost time requirement fast spell that either draws an attachment from your void or you get to kill an enemy attachment. You won't be drawing any attachments from your void unless, well, maybe a Nyctophobia or something like that. And this is mainly for killing an enemy attachment, and it can kill anything, even opposing Martyr's Chains or Pitiful Enecta. Next up, Luminary Reclaimer as a versus card. So this is a 4-cost double time requirement 4/4 Radiant that on being summoned shuffles a void of your choice into its owner's deck. And on Entomb, which means when it dies, you put 4 copies of Luminary Reclaimer into your deck. So the first part is usually against Reanimator decks or Wisp decks. So when you shuffle your enemy's void back into their deck, first of all, you gotta be wary of your Scorpion Traps. So the upside is that if the opponent already triggered your Scorpion Traps, you get to reshuffle them into their deck and you might be able to get more Scorpions. The downside is the remaining Scorpion Traps are not in the top 20 cards of the opponent's deck. They're just spread throughout their whole deck. The biggest upside of this is obviously this works like a worse version of Adjudicator's Gavel that makes the enemy's void inaccessible. It just single effect shuffles their void back, but it usually should work against Reanimator decks, against Wisp decks, as I previously said. It can also be used to shuffle your void back, for example, if it is very late in the game and you're playing against one of my mill decks. So yeah, there's also that option. On the Entomb, you gotta be careful. I had a game where the opponent weathered this unit down to a 0/4 from effects. I don't remember if it was Telut or World Joiner or something like that. And then scared it to being a 4/0. And then when you put copies of this card into your deck, they are literal copies of this card. So when its stat line changes, the stat line of the copies you get into your deck change. So I got some unusable units into my deck. But that game didn't come to me drawing them anyway. Just a fun fact. Alright, next up we have a third Xenan Temple. I've already talked about this card, and this is my proactive drop. This is my follow-up for the market. This is a follow-up, which means the turn after you play a merchant, you can play this on an empty board. Otherwise, if you don't need any of the other stuff, if you're not playing against Reanimator, if you're not playing against attachments, if you don't have your combo, this is just a follow-up, so yes. And last but not least, we have the Finisher. And this is Zindel Revealed, 8-cost double time double shadow requirement, a 7/7 Radiant. When you summon it, you play 2 1/1 Helici with Deadly and Unblockable. And when one of your units hits the enemy player, draw the top card of their deck and reduce its cost by 2. So by Finisher, I mean when it's late in the game, you gotta have at least one card in your market that you can, when you draw it, you're that more likely to finish the game quickly. Usually these cards have a high cost and or influence requirement, so yeah, this is the highest cost one. This also generates a lot of board advantage, a lot of card advantage. Remember, when you play it and attack with your remaining units, if you already had some on the board, they can give you the cards from the opponent's deck. The only downside or a non-bow from this ability is when you first use Amaran Stinger to put Scorpion Traps into your opponent's deck, and then from Azindel's effect you get to draw those Scorpion Traps from your opponent's deck. Now that's a somewhat negative synergy, because you get those Scorpion Traps, which means your opponent gets the Scorpion, but you get to redraw a card from your deck without the reduced cost, but still drawing a card. So it's a bit of a downside, but usually it's not that high of a downside, just something you can come across when you're playing this deck. Okay, so these are the general explanations. Now for some general strategies. So this deck at its heart is a mid-range deck. Not a very aggro deck because it has 5-drop units. It's more like a mid-range deck. Definitions may vary, obviously. Some people might just call it an aggro deck. For me, it's a mid-range deck. So for sure, you want to be able to do something by turn 2. So either you have to have Initiative of the Sands in the 3-drop or just a 2-drop, or an Annihilate to answer the opponent's early threat, because there's also a chance the opponent is running an aggro deck. So for sure, when your hand consists of 4 power, a 4-drop, a 5-drop, and a Seek power, you want to redraw that. Also, you always gotta start the game, if it's possible, on time influence. So not on Shadow Sigils, because there is always a chance of you drawing your Teacher of Humility. And you should have at least one time source in your hand anyway. If you're starting with just Shadow Sigil, you should toss that away. Don't be afraid to mulligan or to redraw into 6 cards with this deck, because it has such powerful openings that 6 cards are enough to win the game for you. Next up, there's the whole Governor Sahin math. So when I said goldfishing, which means just doing the maximum your deck can do on curve without the opponent interfering. So you can, for example, play Initiative of the Sands on turn 1. Then on turn 2, you can play either Teacher of Humility and then later attack with it, or you can play Aurelian Merchant and get your Azurite Pryxis into your hand. Turn 3, you either attack with the Teacher and you get a relic, or you already have a relic from the Merchant. On turn 3, you play Governor Sahin. And on turn 4, you use his ability, you get the Chains. It's for 3 costs, and you already had at least 3 power in your hand. And then you play a power card, and you already can start reducing the enemy's armies to dust. Later in the game, when you're playing your power out, you usually should stop at 7 power. Why 7? Because if you have a curse on your opponent, or you have a Pryxis in your hand that you got from your Merchant, on 7 you can play Governor, use his ability, get your Martyr's Chains, and then you can play those power cards you had to keep destroying enemies' units. Also, on 7, you can play Mirror's Nightshade and use his ultimate to play Nyctophobia on the opponent. And when you're on 7, you can play a power card and play your Azindel. So you shouldn't go above 7 when the game state doesn't require you to do so. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed my talk through of this deck. You will be seeing some games play with this deck in a moment, and I wish you all a great day. See you later, guys. Calebovitsch out.